When you are running for your life in a pitch-black mine shaft, you assume whatever is down there is chasing you. But when we finally checked our GoPro footage a week later, we realized we were dead wrong. It wasn't behind us. It was running in the dark, right beside us. There were 4 of us exploring an abandoned copper mine out past Ely, Nevada. We were miles from anyone, deep underground. We thought we were completely alone. Then, my flashlight caught it. A single, heavy boot print, pressed deep into the wet clay. It was fresh. Water was still actively pooling in the heel. It was facing deeper into the dark, and most importantly, none of us had made it. We should have turned back right then. Instead, we kept walking. So the mine didn't even seem special at first, just another hole in the dirt. The entrance was half collapsed. Rotting timber, some rusted rail track going straight into the dark. Somebody had spray-painted "unsafe" on a concrete slab out front. Like that ever stops anyone. This wasn't some viral YouTube stunt. No ring lights, no drones, just 4 idiots with headlamps and cheap chest mounts. Me, Jake, Luis, and Aaron. We'd explored abandoned stuff before. An old middle school, a gutted motel in Utah. This just felt like the next step. But the thing is, mines aren't like empty buildings. There's no ambient light leaking in through a broken window. You stand at the mouth at noon, and 10 feet in, it's just a solid wall of pitch black. We geared up at the tailgate. Jake went in first. He always did. Inside, it immediately smelled like wet pennies and drywall dust. The air was heavy, cold. Our headlamps were just these cheap LED beams bouncing off the thick dust we were kicking up. The floor was packed dirt, mostly, with patches of slick, reddish mud where water was seeping straight through the rock. We walked along the rusted rail track for maybe 50 yards. Then the tunnel bent hard to the right. That's where we hit the first set of prints. The print in the mud was different. Narrow heel, a weird diagonal slash right through the center of the tread. Probably just some other guys, Jake said. He sounded annoyed, honestly, like he was trying to convince himself. And sure, maybe. But here's the thing. I looked at the mud on the other side of the tracks. There were no outgoing prints, just one set, pointing straight into the dark. And we kept walking. Which, looking back, is the part that actually makes me sick. The shaft bottlenecked, forcing us into single file. The ceiling was held up by these massive, splintered 6x6 timbers. Every couple of minutes, you'd hear the rock settle somewhere deep in the mine. Not a big crash, just this dry, heavy creak. Maybe 100 yards past the bend, there was an old steel ore cart tipped completely off the rails, fused to the track with 80 years of rust. The boot prints with the diagonal slash didn't just walk past it, they paced around it. 3 tight, overlapping circles in the wet clay. Like the guy had just stood there behind the cart for a long time, shifting his weight. Aaron was messing with the chest strap on his GoPro, trying to get it straight. But Luis flashed his cheap LED up at the wall right behind the cart. Hey, look at this. There were gouges in the rock face, deep, sharp chips. The rock inside the cuts was bright, pale gray, standing out against all the dark grime around it. Someone had been hitting the wall with a hammer or a pry bar. This mine was officially boarded up in the 50s, but Jake swiped his leather glove over the gouges. The rock dust that fluttered down wasn't caked on. It was totally loose. fresh. We hit a fork in the shaft. Left side graded downward into black, standing water. Right side climbed. The prints with the diagonal slash went right. Jake stopped. "We good to keep going?" he asked, looking back at us. None of us actually answered. We just sort of nodded. Left side graded downward into black, standing water. Right side climbed. The prints with the diagonal slash went right. Jake stopped. "We good to keep going?" he asked, looking back at us. None of us actually answered. We just sort of nodded. Because the thing is, 4 guys walking and talking in a rock tube echo like crazy. If somebody was down here, they already knew exactly where we were. The grade was steeper, and the clay got slick. I had to keep grabbing the rotting support timbers so I didn't slip. And that smell, the wet copper and old sweat. It was so thick I could taste it in the back of my throat, right through the cheap paper filter of the respirator. Then there was a sound. Not a cave-in, not a timber groaning. It was a wet, heavy crunch, like 190 pounds of weight shifting on loose gravel. We all just stopped walking. My bare hand was still gripping a splintered beam. The 4 of us pointed our chest mount lights straight up the incline. The beams just hit empty rock and floating dust. "Just an echo of us," Luis whispered. Except we were standing completely still, and the sound had come from maybe 40 feet further up the tunnel. There was another crunch, just a boot pivoting in the dirt. Jake yelled up the shaft, "Hey, we're coming up!" It was loud enough to make my ears ring. But there was no answer, just the flat sound of his voice dying against the wet rock. Then Jake took one single step up the incline, right at the absolute limit of where our LED beams faded out. Something was pressed flat against the right wall. Not a shadow, it was fabric, dark canvas. A shoulder and a leg just melded into the uneven rock face. When you stare into total blackness with a cheap flashlight, your brain tries to make patterns out of nothing. I was praying it was just a weirdly shaped mineral deposit. But then the canvas moved. It didn't jump out. It didn't lunge. It just slowly, smoothly peeled off the wall and leaned backward into the dark, out of the light. Aaron slipped on the slick clay. His knee hit the rock hard, and he let out this sharp, loud curse. Me and Luis jerked around to look at him. It took maybe 2 seconds to pull him up. But when we pointed the chest rigs back up the incline, the canvas was gone. Just the raw, empty rock. But right exactly where that shoulder had been pressed against the wall, there was a brand new boot print in the muck. The deep, diagonal slash. The dirty water was still actively pooling into the heel impression. Jake didn't try to call out again. He didn't tell us what to do. He didn't even turn around. He just started walking backward down the slope, stumbling a little. We did exactly the same thing. 4 guys just shuffling backward in the dark, practically stepping on each other's toes to keep our lights pointed up the tunnel. About 50 feet down, the sound started again. Heavy boots on loose gravel. But whoever it was wasn't rushing us. That's the part that actually messes with my head. We would take a step backward, and the unseen weight up the tunnel would take 1 step forward. One heavy crunch, then a pause, another crunch. They were just pacing us, staying exactly 1 step out of range of our cheap LED beams, just walking us out. We didn't actually run until we hit the main fork. Then somebody, I think it was Luis, just broke. He bolted down the main shaft, and we all followed him. We were tripping over the rusted rails, bouncing off the damp rock walls. My chest rig light was just whipping crazily across the ceiling. Behind us, the heavy boots weren't pacing us anymore. They sped up, not a dead sprint, but closing the gap. Fast. I looked back over my shoulder right before we hit the entrance, but my light was moving too fast to catch anything. But I could hear it. Heavy boots taking the uneven ground at a fast jog. No hard hat, no flashlight. Whoever it was just navigated a collapsed, pitch-black mine shaft without hesitating. We hit the outside air and didn't even slow down. We just tore through the brush until we got to Jake's Tacoma. Jake dropped his keys in the dirt, scooped them up with shaking hands, and unlocked it. We practically climbed over each other to get inside the cab. He threw it in reverse, tires spinning in the loose gravel. As we pulled out onto the highway, I looked back at the hillside. The mine entrance just looked like a black cut in the dirt. But right on the edge of it, right where the shadow met the fading daylight, the canvas jacket was standing there. Not stepping out, just watching the truck drive away. Nobody said a word on the drive back to Ely. Aaron was just rubbing his knee where he hit the rock, staring out the passenger window. Luis kept muttering about acoustics, trying to convince all of us that the heavy footsteps were just some weird echo distortion bouncing off the shaft walls. Jake just drove the Tacoma in dead silence. We finally stopped at a Sinclair station right on the edge of town. I went straight into the dirty little bathroom around back to scrub the clay off my hands and face. I was standing at the sink, looking down, and I saw a smear across the toe of my right merrill. It wasn't the red clay from the mine. It was dark, thick, tacky, like old axle grease. And pressed right into the rubber lip of the toe was a torn shred of fabric. Heavy, dark canvas. None of us were wearing canvas. I don't know exactly what happened in the chaos when we all broke and bolted for the exit, but somewhere in that pitch-black shaft, while we were running blind, my foot must have come down right on top of him. I didn't show the guys. I just walked out of the bathroom. Got back in the Tacoma, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. I just needed to know exactly when it happened. We never uploaded the GoPro footage to YouTube. Most of the MP4 files were totally useless anyway. Just blown out LED glare, motion blur, and the sound of our boots slipping in the clay. But I pulled the SD card that night at my apartment. I was scrubbing through Luis's video on VLC player, just hitting the spacebar, pausing it frame by frame right at the exact moment we panicked at the fork and bolted. There's one frame, just a fraction of a second. Luis's chest mount swings wild to the right as he turns to run. And right there, at the very edge of the lens distortion, is a heavy canvas shoulder. Not 30 feet behind us, right next to Luis. Whoever it was didn't just chase us out. During that blind scramble in the pitch black, he was running right alongside us, inside our group. I don't do underground stuff anymore. Gutted houses, maybe. Places with actual windows and fire escapes, but not dead-end rock shafts. Because the thing I can't stop thinking about isn't the footprint or the grease on my boot. It's the fact that a grown man was navigating a collapsed, pitch-black tunnel at a dead sprint right next to us without making a sound. He didn't just know the layout. He lived in the absolute dark. And he's still down there,